I never thought my own sister could betray me on the happiest day of my life. I had imagined this moment since I was a little girl, the day I would walk down the aisle, surrounded by love, laughter, and the warmth of family. I pictured the smiles, the congratulatory hugs, the tears of joy, and the way my parents would beam with pride. I had dreamed of it countless times, rehearsing in my mind how perfect it would feel to finally step into this new chapter of my life with Adil, the man I loved, by my side. But nothing could have prepared me for the darkness hiding behind my sister's smile. The morning of my wedding, everything seemed flawless. Sunlight spilled through the windows, glinting off the polished floor, and the scent of fresh flowers filled the air. Each bouquet was arranged with delicate care, every petal perfectly in place, just as I had envisioned for months. My dress hugged me in all the right places, the lace flowing gently as I moved, and the delicate veil made me feel like I was stepping into a dream. Adil stood nearby, his eyes shining with happiness, unable to hide the smile that spread across his face every time he looked at me. His joy was infectious, and for a moment, I allowed myself to breathe and take it all in. Yet, as I glanced at my sister Mehwish, standing beside me, a strange feeling crept over me. It was subtle at first, almost imperceptible, a flicker in her eyes, a hesitation in her smile, a tension in her posture that I couldn't quite understand. I told myself I was imagining things, that it was just wedding nerves, that maybe she was overwhelmed with emotion, excited for me, just like everyone else. But there was something in that look, something too sharp, too calculated, that made my chest tighten with unease. I tried to shake it off, focusing on the laughter of my friends, the chatter of the guests arriving, the gentle hum of music filling the room. I wanted to immerse myself in the happiness of the day, to allow myself to be carried away by the joy I had worked so hard to create. But that flicker in her eyes lingered, refusing to be ignored. It was a shadow behind her smile, a quiet warning I didn't yet understand. Little did I know, that fleeting moment, that subtle shift in her gaze, was the first sign of a storm that would soon sweep into my life. A storm orchestrated not by strangers or enemies, but by the person I trusted most. The person who had shared my childhood secrets, my laughter, my dreams, was about to turn that trust into a weapon. And as the day unfolded, I would realize that the perfect wedding I had imagined, the day I had longed for my entire life, might not be as untouched by betrayal as I had believed. Mehwish and I had always seemed inseparable, or at least that's what I believed. As children, we shared everything, secrets whispered in the dark, giggles over silly jokes, and even our clothes, swapping dresses and shoes as though they were extensions of ourselves. We were best friends, allies against the world, two halves of the same whole. But as the years went by, I began to notice the small cracks that had always been there, subtle yet persistent. She would frown a little too long when someone complimented me, or roll her eyes when I shared a story of success. Sometimes she would laugh at my achievements in a way that felt sharp, a little too forced, like a shadow hiding behind the smile she showed the world. I tried to convince myself it was normal, sibling rivalry, a little envy here and there, nothing to worry about. After all, isn't that what sisters do? But even as I told myself this, the unease lingered. She seemed to measure herself against me constantly. My friends, my choices, the admiration I received from others. Every compliment I received, every opportunity I seized, seemed to fuel a quiet resentment I couldn't ignore. When I got engaged, the subtle cracks widened into something far more troubling. Mehwish's jealousy became sharper, harder to dismiss. She would comment on Adil in ways that felt almost accidental, as if she were just asking questions, but the tone carried a weight I couldn't ignore. "Are you sure he's the right one?" she'd ask, her words cloaked in concern, but her eyes glinting with something else entirely. At family gatherings, she would sometimes vanish for long stretches, only to reappear with that sly, knowing smile that sent a chill down my spine. I wanted desperately to trust her, to believe that she loved me as a sister should, but deep inside, a small voice began to whisper warnings. Something was off. Something was brewing behind that perfect mask. I chose to ignore it. I wanted to believe she was just acting out, that these moments were fleeting and harmless, that our bond was stronger than jealousy. I told myself everything would be fine, that our childhood closeness would withstand whatever this strange tension was. I didn't see the truth. I didn't recognize the storm quietly forming in the background of my life. Mewish wasn't merely envious, she was plotting. And what she had in mind wasn't a petty argument or fleeting hurt. She was planning to ruin the one day in my life that should have been perfect, to steal my joy and replace it with humiliation. And I, blinded by love and trust, had no idea it was coming. A week before the wedding, things started to feel off in ways I couldn't ignore. Invitations that I had meticulously prepared went missing, and I would discover them tucked in the oddest corners, or sometimes not delivered at all. Vendors began calling with complaints, payments they claimed hadn't been made, schedules that seemed suddenly confused. Every detail I had so carefully planned, every hour I had spent coordinating flowers, catering, and music, seemed to unravel before my eyes. At first, I blamed it on stress, on bad luck, on the chaos that naturally comes with a wedding. But deep down, I felt a gnawing unease that whispered something more sinister was at play. It didn't take long for me to notice Mewish's presence around every problem. She was always there helping, always hovering, offering to make calls, to straighten things out, to calm upset vendors. But there was something too deliberate, too rehearsed in her manner. It was as if she was relishing the chaos she had created, watching to see how I would respond, taking pleasure in my frantic attempts to keep everything together. One evening, unable to sleep, I lingered near the living room and accidentally overheard her on the phone. The words made my blood run cold. "Don't worry, everything will fall apart on her wedding day. She'll regret ever trusting me." My heart froze. I couldn't breathe. I replayed it in my mind, hoping I had misheard, that maybe it was someone else, or a cruel joke. But the tone, the sharp, icy certainty in her voice left no doubt. My own sister, the person I had trusted the most, was plotting to ruin the happiest day of my life. I confronted her the next day, trying to find some trace of the sister I had loved, trying to appeal to whatever bond might still exist between us. I spoke gently, asking if she was upset, if something was wrong, hoping for honesty. She smiled at me, sweet and innocent, the same smile she had worn for years. But behind it was a glint I had seen before, the edge of manipulation, the hunger for control. She didn't deny what I had overheard. She didn't even flinch. Instead, she seemed to thrive on my doubt, on the anxiety and fear that now gnawed at me. In that moment, I realized something terrifying. If I didn't act, she could destroy everything I had built, everything I had dreamed of for this day. The chaos she had sown could easily ruin my wedding, leaving me humiliated in front of everyone I loved. And I knew then, with a clarity that made my chest tighten, that I had to fight back, but carefully. I had to protect my day, my happiness, and my dignity before it was too late. The day of the wedding finally arrived, and I forced myself to stay calm, wearing a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. Every part of me wanted to relax, to let the excitement and joy of the day wash over me, but a nagging sense of unease wouldn't leave. I tried to focus on a deal, on the laughter of our friends, on the warmth of family, but it was impossible to ignore the subtle storm brewing around me. Mewish had already begun her work. She moved through the crowd like a shadow, smiling sweetly while spreading whispers and rumors among relatives. Every word was calculated, carefully placed to sow doubt, to make people question, to make them uneasy. She subtly embarrassed a deal in front of my family, questioning his decisions with an innocent tone that hid her true intentions. Even my bridesmaids were not safe. She attempted to convince them to back out at the last minute, whispering fears and doubts, trying to turn my closest friends into accomplices in her sabotage. I could feel the tension in the room thickening, a palpable weight pressing down on the joyous occasion. Guests who should have been celebrating were instead exchanging nervous glances, unsure what was wrong. The laughter felt strained, the smiles uneasy, and every sideways look seemed like a silent confirmation that something was off. I wanted to scream, to confront her publicly, to reveal her betrayal, but I knew that any outburst on my part would only play into her hands. She wanted chaos, and showing fear or anger would hand it to her on a silver platter. Then came her cruelest act. She intercepted the wedding gift list, claiming that the gifts had been lost and that vendors could not deliver on time. It was a calculated move designed to make the day look like a disaster, to make it seem as though I had failed, as if I had lost control of everything I had planned. The carefully built image of a perfect wedding was suddenly under threat, and she was at the center of it all, smiling sweetly, pretending to help, while secretly attempting to destroy everything I had worked for. I realized then, with a sinking heaviness in my chest, that this was betrayal in its purest form, cold, intentional. Hidden behind the mask of a loving sister, Maywish had aimed to ruin the one day that was supposed to be mine, the day I had dreamed of since childhood. And in that moment, despite the fear, the anxiety, and the frustration, a quiet determination began to grow within me. I would not let her succeed. I sat on the edge of the bed with my veil pooled at my feet and felt the world tighten around my throat. Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes, heavy and hot. But I swallowed them down because there was no room for a breakdown. Not today. Not when every ounce of that day had been imagined and planned for years. My first instinct was to let the anger have its way, to storm out, to shout, to expose her in front of everyone. But the image of my father's quiet face and my mother's hands, steady and worn from years of holding our family together, stopped me. I remembered my mother's voice, low and steady, saying something that suddenly felt like a lifeline. Justice isn't always about punishment. Sometimes it's about exposing the truth. That line settled into me like a plan. If Maywish wanted spectacle, I would give her clarity. If she wanted to humiliate me in public, I would preserve my dignity and let her actions reveal themselves, quietly, clearly, without me adding fuel to the fire. I wiped my cheeks, put my shoulders back, and began to work like a woman on a mission. First, I called every vendor. One by one, I went through the list: florist, caterer, photographer, the van driver, the decorator who'd promised the lights that made the hall look like a dream. I confirmed payments, asked for delivery times, and listened sharply for any hesitation or unfamiliar names. Where there had been confusion earlier, there were now confirmations and reassurances. I made notes, names, times, small anchors of truth I could point to if needed. Each, yes, everything's on schedule was a small victory, a stitch in the fabric I was repairing. Then I spoke to my bridesmaids. I didn't dramatize it. I didn't show them the panic I felt. I asked them to stay close, to follow the timeline I had prepared, and to tell me immediately if anything odd happened, if a decoration went missing, if someone tried to move things, if anyone whispered or pulled them aside. I gave them roles, one to handle the bouquet adjustments, one to keep the guests entertained during last-minute delays, and another to be a lookout. I trusted them, and I asked them to trust me. Their faces steadied when I spoke. Their loyalty was a balm I hadn't realized I needed until that moment. I also dug up small proofs, screenshots of messages that hinted at delays, payment confirmations I had saved, names of the vendors who'd received money. I printed them quietly and folded them into an envelope I put in my clutch. It was a small, private arsenal of facts, no yelling required, just undeniable evidence should I need to show it. Then, because I couldn't risk a public crashing of emotions, I drafted a short speech. It was careful and measured. No accusations, no theatrics, just a story about trust, about the value of honesty, and about how truth, in time, tends to reveal itself. I wrote a line that would land where it mattered, not to publicly shame, but to plant a seed of awareness in the minds of those who'd been fed whispers. I planned the moment I'd use it, during the toast, when faces were turned to me and the room would listen. Revenge, I decided, would not be loud. It would not be a spectacle that fed her hunger for chaos. Instead, it would be precise. Confirmations instead of accusations, witnesses instead of screams, and a calm that made her instability visible by contrast. I practiced my breathing, practiced smiling on command, practiced the words I'd use, soft, controlled, but with an edge that would cut through rumor. As I smoothed my dress and tucked the envelope into my clutch, something shifted inside me. The fear that had sat heavy in my chest lightened into a rigid, cool determination. This wasn't only about saving a day. It was about refusing to let someone I loved weaponize intimacy and family. I would stand firm, protect what I had built, and ensure the truth had room to surface. Walking to the venue felt different now, less like stepping into a trap, more like walking onto a stage where I had rehearsed every line. I was ready to be graceful, but I was also ready to be clear. The ceremony began, and for the first time in what felt like days, I allowed myself a deep breath. Everything went as planned, thanks to the quiet diligence I had poured into every detail. The flowers were perfect, the music flowed seamlessly, and Adil stood at the altar, his hand reaching for mine, his smile steady and warm. The guests were settling in, chatting softly, unaware of the storm that had been brewing behind the scenes. For a moment, I let myself believe that all of my fears had been for nothing. But then I caught her out of the corner of my eye. Mehwish was trying one last trick. She leaned toward a cousin, whispering just loud enough to be heard, hoping to create a disruption during the vows. My heart tightened, but I didn't panic. Instead, I paused mid-step, turned toward her, and smiled. A small, controlled smile that carried more weight than words could convey. The look in my eyes said it all, I knew. I had seen through every layer of her plans, and no shadow she tried to cast would touch me today. Later, during my speech, I held the room's attention with calm certainty. I spoke about love, family, and the quiet power of honesty. I didn't call her out directly, there was no need, but each carefully chosen word landed with precision. Sometimes, I said, my voice steady, the people closest to us try to hurt us the most, not realizing that their actions will be revealed in time. The words hung in the air, and a hush fell over the guests. I watched as faces turned subtly toward her, sensing the unspoken meaning behind my sentences. The tension in the room became almost tangible, a tightrope stretching between truth and deception, and I felt a quiet satisfaction knowing that my point had been made without raising my voice or causing drama. By the end of the day, the outcome of her schemes was undeniable. Relatives who had been unsure, who had wavered in their trust, approached her privately, questioning the inconsistencies, challenging the whispers she had spread. Mehwish looked shocked, her carefully constructed mask slipping as she realized the exposure she faced. Anger and disbelief flashed across her face, but it no longer had power over me. I felt a profound relief wash over me, heavier and more satisfying than any anger or revenge could ever have been. My wedding remained beautiful, intact, and filled with genuine joy. More importantly, I had protected my happiness without losing control, letting the truth speak for itself. The betrayal had been revealed not through spectacle or confrontation, but through patience, strategy, and the quiet strength of staying calm in the face of chaos. And for the first time that day, I truly felt victorious. After the wedding, the tension that had hovered for weeks began to settle, but not for Mehwish. She avoided me, her presence shrinking to the corners of family gatherings, her once confident smiles replaced by awkward silence. Her jealousy, her carefully planned sabotage, had backfired, and slowly, the people around us began to see her actions clearly. Relatives whispered among themselves, connecting the dots of the inconsistencies and the subtle manipulations she had attempted. For the first time, the truth was visible to everyone, not through my accusations, but through the evidence of her own behavior. Adil held my hand that evening as we stepped away from the last of our guests, his eyes warm and steady. "You handled it perfectly," he whispered, and in those words, I felt the weight of weeks of worry lift from my shoulders. I realized then that justice doesn't always have to be loud or fueled by anger. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's clever. Sometimes it's about allowing truth to surface naturally, letting people witness it unfold and see the real story for themselves. Looking through the wedding photos later, I noticed the joy captured in every frame, the smiles, the laughter, the genuine moments that no one could take away. These memories were mine, untouched by betrayal, preserved exactly as I had dreamed them. For the first time, I understood what it meant to rise above treachery, not through revenge, not through retaliation, but through patience, composure, and strategic calm. In my heart, I forgave Mewish, not because she deserved it, certainly not because she had acted rightly, but because I refused to let her resentment, her manipulation, or her hatred take up space in my life. Forgiveness became my armor, a way to protect my own peace and happiness. I learned that some lessons are painful, leaving scars that remind you of past wounds, but they also teach resilience, strength, and the importance of trusting your instincts. And in that understanding, I found freedom, not just from her actions, but from the fear and anxiety that had threatened to shadow my most important day. Life has a way of testing us in ways we could never predict, often through the very people we hold closest to our hearts. Betrayal cuts deeply, leaving wounds that ache long after the moment has passed, but it doesn't have to define who we are or dictate the path of our lives. True strength lies in standing firm, protecting your own happiness, and allowing the truth to surface in its own time. There is a power in calm, in patience, in strategic action that far outweighs the fleeting satisfaction of lashing out in anger. We must remember this. Those who try to destroy us often expose their true nature through their own actions. Their schemes, their manipulations, their attempts to undermine us, all carry within them the seeds of their own undoing. And when that truth is revealed, it is not revenge that has prevailed, it is justice. Justice, when carried out wisely, thoughtfully, and without losing oneself in emotion, is far more satisfying than any temporary victory achieved through anger or retaliation. The lesson is simple, yet profound. Protect your peace, trust your instincts, and let integrity guide your actions. In doing so, you rise above betrayal, you preserve your joy, and you allow the truth to shine brighter than any deceit. And in that clarity, you find not just victory, but freedom. A freedom that cannot be taken, a satisfaction that cannot be tarnished, and a life strengthened by resilience, patience, and unwavering dignity.